Hey, what's happening, all you huntsmen and huntresses out there? I'm Deuce Disden, and I'm coming at you with another RWBY episode review. This time it's Volume 7's Episode 12, titled With Friends Like These, the penultimate episode right before the finale of Volume 7 of RWBY. It's been a wild ride, and it just keeps getting wilder. It seems that every kingdom Team RWBY visits is another one that ends up falling in some way, shape, or form, or losing its relic. So let's see what happens in this episode, shall we? As we open up with Ruby giving her entire spiel about Ironwood's plans to all of her allies, with both Crow and Robin just being dumbfounded by what Ironwood might be trying to do. And while Clover does try to defend Ironwood's decisions, he gets the alert of Team RWBY as well as Crow, Team Ranger, Oscar, all being wanted and to be detained on site. And while he does inform both Crow that he has to arrest them while Team RWBY is about to be detained. He's trying his best to be amicable about this whole situation. He's not wanting to have a big confrontation because, they still fought together, they work together, they have a close relationship. Some might even say it was very close to being pretty close. But Robin Hill takes offense to all of this. She's not down for any of this and immediately stands against Clover, especially considering the fact that you know, well, this you need to take into account the fact that Robin Hill isn't under arrest, not whatsoever. But ultimately, she can't go with anything that Ironwood is planning to do. So a fight breaks out immediately, and during the scuffle, what Tyrion's tied to ends up being shaken loose, meaning that he's able to get kind of free. He's still tied up, but he's able to move around. And he uses this as an opportunity to knock out the pilots and send the plane that they're all on plummeting into the tundra. Meanwhile, Penny and Winter have this heart to heart. And Penny kind of questions this position and the fact that Ironwood is leaving Mantle to die, basically. Completely and utterly leaving Mantle to die. Whereas Winter, she's about following orders. And that really ultimately is the difference here. Whereas a lot of the people allied to Ironwood were always going to be people who followed orders. They believed in duty above all else. Ruby and her friends, they believe in life. Believing in protecting as much life as they possibly can. You know, not just leaving behind a few to perish when there's the possibility they might be able to save even more people. That's just not how they roll. Now, whether that's a wise decision, honestly, that's a matter of opinion. Maybe it's better to just leave a few people to perish if you're able to save a good majority of people. Maybe it's not. It's debatable, honestly. But Penny really does question Winter on the fact that on what she believes in and how she feels about this whole situation. But while Winter says that this is a hard choice, that this isn't something made lightly, Penny doesn't agree with any of this and doesn't feel good about any of this as well. Meanwhile, after a brief conversation while both sides kind of tries to talk down the other, naturally they come to blows. It was always going to be like this, which is pretty interesting because, the Aesops don't have Clover, who was again their ace in the hole. When things started looking bad, you had Clover to come in clutch, but Clover is a little busy. So it really does bring up the question, will the Aesops be able to prevail against Team RWBY? Will Team RWBY be able to prevail against the pros? Ultimately, maybe not beforehand when they first arrived in Mantle, but because the Aesops helped to train Team RWBY, they're better experienced now. And so Ruby makes a mad dash out, quickly followed by Harriet, and the fight ensues. Although Ruby does try to talk Harriet down a little bit, Harriet was always always felt that it was going to come down to something like this, never feeling quite right about them to begin with. But that ultimately comes from the fact that their philosophies were always different, and I always wondered how that was going to come into play. Whereas Team Ruby considers themselves a group of friends, the Aesops, they're all business, and maybe that was ultimately their downfall. Maybe that was always going to be the case. Duty versus hmm, duty versus conscious, having a conscience, emotion. That was always going to come into blows. But the fight ensues: Ruby versus Harriet, Elm versus Yang, Vine versus Blake, aerial aerial acrobatics and all that. Speed versus speed, strength versus strength, maneuverability versus maneuverability, and we also ultimately kind of get a moment where Blake does end up being captured by Elm, with Vine trying to talk them both down, saying that, we don't need to fight, we need to work through this. Elm is pissed because they feel that ultimately Blake and Yang started all this by betraying them, but Yang riles up Elm by saying that, oh, when Blake tries to talk them down and, say, how can you do this? People will end up dying. Yang just dismisses all that, saying that, well, they're just following orders. That's all they ever do. They don't care if millions of people will end up dead, which gets Elm really riled up. Meanwhile, we have the showdown between Weiss and Marrow, and Marrow, tries to talk things down. Marrow's honestly probably the most emotionally centered person out of all of this, which we saw throughout the course of this season, which honestly is a credit to this season. We were able to be endeared to the Aesops. We got to know their personalities, their philosophies, their fighting styles, all of that good stuff. But we also got to understand why they would take the stance that they're taking and why they believe what they believe. Harriet is completely all in on taking them down, no questions asked. Elm feels like she's been betrayed by them, despite the fact that she really did and like them, and I think that's what doubles how emotionally she's gotten over all of this, feeling that they betrayed them. Vine, ever the centered one, is trying to diffuse the whole situation, whereas Marrow, he's emotionally trying to talk it out. It's just like, it doesn't have to be this way. We're on the same side. You guys need to just give up. Let's work through this, blah blah blah. So there's emotions within emotions and feelings within feelings, and everyone has their own point of view that they're fighting for. Speaking of which, we pick up at the crash site where miraculously, everybody's basically okay, though Robin Hill pretty much took the brunt of everything. And, as Crow checks to make sure that Robin is still alive, Clover tries to pull a bit of a trick saying, hey, you should give up, that way we can get Robin some medical attention. And Crow even calls him out on this, which is just kind of like, yeah, dude, oof. Yeah, that's a low blow right there, but ultimately it does come to blows. As while Clover feels bad about this whole situation, he still believes in Ironwood no matter what, and Crow believes in Ruby, and that's the ultimate challenge of their ideals. They believe both the side that they're on, regardless of their personal feelings towards each other. Meanwhile, Tyrion manages to wake up and is able to free himself from his bonds by dislocating his thumbs. And so we end up getting Tyrion in on the mix with a three-way battle between Crow, Tyrion, and Clover. However, ultimately, Tyrion and Crow end up teaming up, mostly because Crow so wants to take Tyrion down. He really does. But Clover keeps getting in his way from really just giving Tyrion the business. So Tyrion's just like, let's team up, take this guy down, and we can have our little out. And so Tyrion and Crow team up against Clover. It's a complete reversal of how things were previously. Meanwhile, as the fight goes on, Harriet and Ruby end up rushing into where Weiss and Mara are fighting, and we have a moment where Harriet tries to chew out Marrow about the fact that he's not really going all out against Weiss. But Marrow tells Harriet to cool down a bit. They're supposed to be capturing Team Ruby, not trying to execute them. They don't need to go full force. So it just goes to show that even within this group, they're not in sync. They're not completely synergized. They don't fully believe what the others believe. Harriet is completely okay with just, roughing them up as much as possible, whereas Barrow, he's not about that. He doesn't feel that that needs to be the way that they do things. But Harriet quickly has to chase after Ruby as she goes flying off again. So the battle continues with Elm and Vine versus Blake and Yang, and they're able to actually get the upper hand against Vine and his abilities with some well-timed explosives and one of Blake's clones. And with Vine being, blasted downward, Yang is able to grab his restraint device and send him crashing down into the ground. And, that's the first piece taken off the board in terms of the Aesops. It goes to show you can immediately tell that the battle has shifted. It's no longer even footing all around, and the Aesops are on the back foot, much to the surprise of everyone looking around. And I love this moment because it goes to show, everyone kind of realizes that this is real. The first person has fallen. This is really what it's come down to. And, the Aesops start to fall. Marrow, because he was trying to concentrate on either Weiss or her, semblance, her golem, her knight, basically, but he can only focus on one at a time, especially when it came to his stay command. And because Weiss has gained so much control over her summoning, that she was able to, still use it whenever she was even frozen in place. And so with Marrow not being able to keep up with both of them, she was able to get in some well-timed attacks on him. Meanwhile, Ruby starts to get the upper hand on Harriet when she manages to restrain her arms, but Harriet doesn't give up without a fight. And with Blake and Yang teaming up against Elm, their Yang continues to destroy the ground underneath Elm, making it so that she can't root herself in place. And with a massive blow to the ground from Yang, she's able to send Elm flying upwards, and with a combination attack, they manage to take down Elm quick, fast, and in a hurry. And with Harriet being the only one left, she goes charging in at Ruby, only to knock herself out on a nicely timed ice wall by Weiss. And with the Ace operatives completely taken out of order, Team Ruby tries to regroup, only to be met by Pietro and um, Maria, who realize that they have no choice but to help them in this situation. Meanwhile, picking up with John's group, they question where Oscar could possibly be, with Nora going around the corner and quickly finding Oscar, with the relic, only for Oscar to come in, delivering a mighty punch to who it turns out to be Neo, and he manages to get the relic back from her, with him Oscar having no clue who this crazy girl is, but John and his group knowing all too well who she is. Meanwhile, back with the Winter Maiden, Penny, and Winter, it's obvious that Winter is grappling with her emotions during all this. Basically, they're kind of got off the Winter Maiden during all of this. And, it becomes a kind of question, you know, Penny asks to Winter, it's just like, are you okay with all of this? What about emotions? What about feelings? And while Winter, she's grappling with this. She doesn't want to give up her emotions. She doesn't want to give up her feelings. She still deep down believes in her emotions and her feelings and trying to honestly convince herself that what she's doing is right. In comes Cinder blasting in and challenging both of them to get the power of the Winter Maiden, with Penny taking a particular interest in Cinder, as Cinder was the reason why she was dismantled, basically, and Penny being all too ready to take Cinder down. And we pick up with the fight between Clover, Tyrion, and Crow, as Crow ends up being tied up by Clover, but that leaves his weapon, kind of tied up at the moment, allowing Crow to get the opportunity to come in with a well timed punch, which completely destroys Clover's barrier. And with Crow kind of starts to kind of question why Clover just couldn't let this be, why Clover just was willing to follow orders. Honestly, it's Crow kind of grappling with himself. He unquestionably listened to Ozpin way back when, and it ended up causing so much hurt, so many problems. Honestly, this is a moment where Crow's kind of seeing a lot of himself in Clover. And as Clover tries to tell him that he believes in Ironwood regardless, no matter what, unconditionally, in comes Tyrion with Crow's sword, stabbing Clover in the back. And, just as Atlas forces arrive, Tyrion takes this moment to escape, and, Crow comes in to try to do something for Clover, but it's obviously too late. And as Clover lay dying and bleeding out on the snow, Clover realizes that, you're going to be a scapegoat. This was probably playing into their hands, and Crow makes a comment that he'll do what he can to just get back at Ironwood, get back at all of them for all of this. And Clover tells him with his last parting words, good luck. And Clover dies in the snow, with Crow crying out in pain. Dude, what an intense episode. The showdown between Team Ruby and the Aesops was fun and exhilarating and thrilling and just honestly phenomenal, just phenomenally done. I applaud this team on their choreography. They continue to improve with each season, and every episode is better and more well done than the last. And the timely manner they managed to get all this out is just fantastic. Kudos to the Rooster Teeth animation team for Ruby, because they knock it out of the park harder and faster each episode. Well done. And well done on defining each of the ace operatives. Whereas Team Ruby, they've gone through their growing pains. They, believe in each other unconditionally. But with the Aesops, they're not friends. They don't completely believe in each other. They don't have the kind of bond and the ability to just kind of work through things that Ruby does. And, it really showed during the course of the battle. And speaking of which, man, should have known that we couldn't go without someone dying. Just, you know, Salem's team continues to be the biggest source of people just dying on this show. And it really does lead credence to how dangerous they are. Pyrrha, Clover, people are dropping left and right. I'm pretty sure Lionheart died too to Salem's monster, but honestly, I didn't really care too much about Lionheart. He was too much of a narc for me to care about his death. But even Ozpin himself ended up dying. It's just there have been so many just losses, not of the main characters, but hell, even Yang ended up losing an arm. Hell, Adam died too. It's just like there have been some significant deaths in this series. Oh right, and even Roman Torchwick, he ended up dying. That's Neo's whole gripe as well. But so many people have lost their lives and been taken out left and right. But man, what an intense situation. And with the showdown between Penny and Cinder, it makes me wonder, how is this gonna go? Is Penny gonna be able to fend off Cinder? Is Cinder gonna take down Penny? And what about Winter? What's gonna happen to her? I can't wait for the final episode, and I hope you'll tune in too as I do my review of the final episode of Volume 7 of RWBY. But until then, if you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave me a dislike. Tell me your thoughts on this episode in the comment section below. How did you feel about the Aesop's being taken out? How did you feel about the death of Clover and all that? Just tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, leave me a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave me a dislike and subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you never miss out on another RWBY episode review. And until next time, I've been Deuce Din, and I will see you later. Bye bye.